You know that story about the woman who sued McDonald's?
Yeah.
It won over hot coffee. It became a total joke, right? Everyone thought she was just trying to get rich quick. But uh, what if I told you there's way more to it? Like, a lot more.
Oh, yeah, way more. It's a classic example of how public opinion can get totally twisted. We're gonna, dig into court records, look at what the media was saying back then, even see how the story got turned into jokes and songs, all that stuff that buried the real truth.
And the woman involved, Stella Liebeck. She wasn't some, greedy scammer. She was 79 years old, retired lifelong Republican. All she wanted was for McDonald's to admit their coffee was, well, dangerously hot. And she wanted to help with her medical bills.
Her story is important, really. It shows what can happen when a big company messes up and how the public can completely miss the point.
Okay, so let's rewind back to 1992. No cup holders in cars like we have now. Imagine that Stella buys her coffee at the drive-thru, and with nowhere to put it, she puts the cup between her legs so she can add cream and sugar.
That little detail, it matters. Think about it, trying to get the lid off a hot cup in a moving car. It's asking for trouble, right? And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened.
The coffee, which McDonald's kept at something like 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, spills onto Stella.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a little spill. The hot coffee soaked right into her sweatpants, trapped against her skin.
Yeah.
She ended up with third-degree burns.
People forget how bad those burns were. These weren't just like a little red mark. We're talking serious pain and suffering.
You'd think any company, especially one that had over 700 burn cases already, would be like, okay, we messed up. Let's help this woman out, right?
You'd think so, right? But no, McDonald's first offer was only $800. Practically nothing compared to her medical bills and, how this changed her life.
And their excuse, that coffee needs to be that hot to keep its flavor. And because people have long commutes.
Yeah, but who waits hours to drink their coffee, especially if you're already in the car?
It was like they cared more about profits than their customers,
Yeah.
even when someone was clearly hurt.
It was a gamble on their part, a gamble that didn't pay off because this went to court.
Stella had never sued anyone before, but she had to get a lawyer. Her lawyer tried to settle things without a trial, first for $90,000, then for $300,000. McDonald's said no to both.
They were so sure they were right. It was kind of shocking.
So this trial is interesting. Both sides agreed. The coffee was hot, it spilled, and Stella was badly burned. So the question wasn't about what happened, but about who was to blame. Was the coffee itself dangerous?
That's where product liability comes in. Can a company be held responsible if their product is messed up or dangerous?
And the jury decided that, yeah, McDonald's coffee was unreasonably dangerous. They gave Stella $2.9 million.
Yeah, that number, the $2.9 million, that's what everyone remembers, but there's more to it than that.
Right, $160,000 was for her actual medical costs and for her pain and suffering. But most of it, the $2.7 million, that was what they call punitive damages.
Punitive damages aren't about paying the victim back. It's about punishing the company, making them think twice before doing something like this again. And they calculated that amount based on just 2 days of McDonald's coffee sales. Kind of like a way of saying, look how much money you make. You need to be responsible.
It was a big message to McDonald's. You can't just put profits over safety.
But the media, they missed that whole message.
Yeah, they ignored the part about McDonald's messing up and how badly Stella was hurt. All they cared about was that $2.9 million number. It became this symbol of like a sue-happy culture, where anyone could sue for anything and win a ton of money.
And people ate that story up. They already believed that frivolous lawsuits were out of control.
But before we get into that and how that whole idea got started, let's look at how the media spun this McDonald's story.
Right from the start, the media messed things up. They used words like frivolous and jackpot, talking about the verdict. They made Stella look like some kind of con artist, not someone who got hurt because of a company.
Like they wanted to make her the bad guy.
The way they told the story, it played into this fear people already had, this idea that the legal system was full of these dumb lawsuits.
And, I guess there were worries about lawsuits getting out of hand. But who was really pushing that idea? And why?
Well, a lot of it came from, big companies and politicians. They wanted something called tort reform. That's a fancy way of saying they wanted to make it harder to sue companies.
So what does that mean, tort reform? How would it affect regular people?
Basically, they wanted to put limits on how much money you could get if you won a lawsuit, make it tougher to file a class action lawsuit, and harder to prove a company was negligent.
But wouldn't that also hurt people who were actually injured? Make it hard to get justice?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's the problem. They make it sound like there are all these silly lawsuits, but most of them are real cases. Tort reform just protects companies from having to take responsibility.
So it's not about protecting people from greedy lawyers. It's about protecting companies.
Yep. And the McDonald's case. It became a perfect example for them. It was easy to make it sound like this woman was just greedy, trying to get rich off a little accident.
But as we know, it wasn't like that at all.
Mhm.
So how did this idea of all these fake lawsuits get so popular?
They use stories, anecdotes. They're powerful, they make people feel something. And these tort reform people, they use stories to scare people.
Like what kind of stories?
Oh, there was one about this woman who said a SAT scan messed up her psychic powers.
Okay, a psychic suing. Yeah, I can see how that sounds crazy.
But the truth is, she had a bad reaction to the dye they use in the SAT scan can. She got headaches, felt sick, couldn't work anymore. It wasn't about her powers. It was about her losing her income.
So it was a real case, but did she actually win millions of dollars like people said?
No, they threw out the verdict. She didn't get anything, but her story got twisted, made it seem like proof that anyone could sue for anything.
It's amazing how they can just change the facts to fit their story.
Yeah.
And I bet there are other examples too, right?
Oh, yeah, tons of them. Remember the humping hobos case?
Vaguely. There's something about two homeless people on the subway, right?
Yeah, supposedly they were having sex on the tracks. Then they sued the city for millions.
Sounds made up.
It was. They never even filed a lawsuit. It was just a lawyer trying to get attention, and it worked. People went nuts talking about how ridiculous lawsuits were.
So we've got the psychic, the made-up hobo story. What else?
There was this guy, a sex offender. He's hiding from the cops, got frostbite, and the story went around that he was suing the police for not catching him fast enough.
Seriously? That's insane.
He never sued. He just complained about the police. But they turned it into this whole thing about lawsuit abuse.
So it's all about taking a tiny bit of truth and twisting it into something it's not.
Exactly. And the media, they loved it. They just kept repeating these crazy stories, making everyone scared of lawsuits.
And all this fear led to actual laws, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, all over the country. They made it harder to sue companies, put limits on what you could win. It was all thanks to this panic over fake lawsuits.
So the real victims weren't companies getting sued. It was people who actually got hurt.
Yeah. The McDonald's case and all these other stories, they were just a distraction, a way to stop people from holding companies accountable.
It makes you wonder, who really wins in this situation?
The people with power, right. They used fear to get what they wanted. And it worked. They looked at how many lawsuits there were, how much money people were getting. And you know what? It didn't match up with this whole lawsuit abuse story.
So it wasn't about protecting people from lawyers. It was about protecting companies.
Yep. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? By making it harder to sue companies, we've actually made it easier for them to do bad things.
It's like we're helping the bad guys, not the victims.
But we can't forget about Stella Liebeck. She's the one who went through all of this.
She got hurt because a company was careless. And instead of people helping her, they made fun of her, turned her into a joke.
It shows how easy it is to ignore the truth when we're scared or angry.
The McDonald's case, it's not just about coffee and lawsuits. It's about power and the media and how we can be tricked into believing things that aren't true.
We have to be careful, think for ourselves, not just believe everything we hear.
And remember, Stella Liebeck, she's the real person in all of this. It's easy to just, get angry, shake your head at how ridiculous it all seems. But this whole McDonald's thing, it shows us that there's usually more to the story.
It tells us a lot about ourselves, really. Our fears, what we believe, and how those things can be, used against us.
And this kind of stuff still happens, People blaming victims, saying real problems are just fake.
Yeah.
And companies getting away with bad behavior.
We got to remember, justice is important. Everyone should have a chance to fight for what's right. And if the system only helps the powerful, then something's wrong.
So what's the lesson here? What can we learn from all this?
I think it's about thinking for ourselves, you know, questioning what we hear, looking for the different sides to the story. Don't just believe the headlines or the jokes. There's always more going on.
So be informed. Be skeptical. Don't just assume things are true. And remember, the legal system, it's not perfect. But sometimes it's the only way to make things right, especially against big companies.
Exactly. Like the next time you hear about some crazy lawsuit, ask yourself, what's the real story? Who wants me to believe this? And are we more worried about fake lawsuits than we are about companies getting away with stuff?
Those are good questions to think about. And on that note, we hope this deep dive gave you a new way of looking at the McDonald's case and the whole issue of tort reform. Changing the laws to make it harder to sue.
Yeah, remember to be critical of what you hear. Look for different points of view. It's up to all of us to find the truth, cut through all the BS.
Exactly. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another, well, insightful look into something else.
Looking forward to it. And hey, remember, don't believe everything you hear.
So yeah.